Long time no see. This is part 2 of 3, Predicting Evolution in the Age of Mammals. If my voice isn't melodic enough, you can just turn the volume off and read through. All the important parts you can just read. But you'll miss all the fine jokes, I'm sure. So, let's start simply in predicting. Greenhouse world, icehouse world, right? Early Cenozoic, late Cenozoic. Which had more tree-dwelling ecomorphs, or adaptive types, a greenhouse or icehouse world? Which had more runners, more diggers, greenhouse world or icehouse world? Evolutionary trends reflect climatic change. So I'll try to convince you of that. If we look at arboreal ecomorphs, tree squirrels, apatomiids, it's a primate-like thing, sort of. True primates and their relatives, tree shrews, so things that love trees, arboreal ecomorphs. If you look at a plot of the mammal fauna, all right, here's 50% of the fauna all the way down to 0. Arboreal ecomorphs are 40 to 50% through the Paleocene and early Eocene. Then as global temperature drops and you get fewer trees, you switch from tropical to a paratropical environment at middle latitudes of North America. You get down to 30% and then 20%. And into the Oligocene, which is unusually dry and open habitat became significant, it drops down to 10. And then into the Miocene and all the way to the Pleistocene, it's fairly steady arboreal ecomorphs. So apparently the trees reached a critical point where it didn't matter much if you went from warm temperate to cold temperate, and living in trees just didn't matter that much. There are quite a few trees in a cold temperate world. Right? Most of the eastern US is woodland, and then you have alpine trees, conifer forests, and so forth. So if you look at arboreal ecomorphs and then compare that to running and digging ecomorphs, or what I would term extreme open habitat adapted. If you want to compare the extreme of living in the trees, you need something that's open habitat. So I went with extreme runners and digging ecomorphs. So it's bison, grass on horses, pronghorns, moles, gophers, and some others. And if you look at the two plots, they're near mirror images. So as you went from closed habitat to open habitat, these ecomorphs kept increasing. And they get highest in the middle Miocene, in the age of savannas. That's probably not too much of a surprise. The correlation coefficient from the Eocene to the Pleistocene is minus 0.94. That's practically perfect. So as you have lots of trees, lots of arboreal ecomorphs. Few trees, few arboreal ecomorphs, and vice versa for running and digging ecomorphs. So the correlation is nearly perfect, as you might expect. What's really interesting is this. In the early Oligocene, open habitat became significant. And this is when open habitat ecomorphs now outnumber closed habitat ecomorphs. Coincidence? I don't think so. So, predictability in evolution. We can do a degree of tropicality plots for North America, such as primate ecomorphs. They love warm and wet and lots of trees. Here are some modern primates to show you examples of ecomorphs that did exist in North America. Different animals, but they looked like these and lived like these ones. So, lots of primate ecomorphs in a warm, wet world with lots of trees through the Paleocene and Eocene. You see a big drop through the latest Eocene into the Oligocene. And here, there's just 1, 2, 3 genera, and then down to 1 genus, and then they go extinct in North America. No primates or primate-like animals at all, until humans immigrate into North America 35,000 to like 75,000 years ago. That's my estimate anyway. During the Oligocene, very dry, frost is rare absent in mid-latitudes. So it wasn't too cold for primate ecomorphs, but it was a little dry, so you didn't have many. But you did see them get a bit bigger, such as the apatomiids, as you might expect. They probably went into torpor in the dry season to survive. Finding beetle grubs and so forth would be hard to do during the dry season. And then, of course, why go extinct in the early Miocene? Too few trees and too seasonal, too cold. Right? And the odd thing about North America is if you look in the southernmost part of the continent, down in the tropical region, it gets very narrow. So there's not a very large tropical belt. There's not much of a refuge for these tropical adapted animals to survive. So in North America, you see a lot of things go extinct or ecomorphs that go extinct that you might not see go extinct in Asia, where there's a big landmass in the tropical and the cold temperate. So, correlation with global temperature trends, right? If you just plot primate ecomorphs compared to global temperature trends, the coefficient is quite high, 0.84. I was impressed. I thought it'd be a little lower than that. What if we plot not just primates, but other things that are very tropical adapted? Rhino, tapir, and Senghi ecomorphs. Senghis are also called elephant shrews. And in North America, there were a few groups that lived like elephant shrews do today, or Senghis. So if we plot them, what do we see? Well, they make up 35% of the fauna in North America all the way to the late Eocene. Then you see a big drop off in the latest Eocene. And then they go down a bit and up a bit and down and down and down, and then you just get a few left through the late Eocene and the Pleistocene. Correlation coefficient of temperature trends with paratropical ecomorph abundance, 0.87. Hey, it's a little better. So we did a little better by adding more tropical animals. You get more data. And to me, that says, they really do reflect climatic change quite well. It's a very high correlation for a biological correlation. It's only 27 points over 65 million years, but each point does represent hundreds of data points. So, we're looking at major evolutionary trends of Cenozoic mammals. Once again, how predictable is life? Can we make sense of it? Throughout the Cenozoic, mammals trended to increased cruciality, running adaptations, hypsodony, taller teeth in herbivores, brain complexity and size increased body size, adaptations to more open habitat, so the overall climatic trend to a cooler, more seasonal climate through the Age of Mammals gives us the times arrow producing these trends. But modern mammals are not superior to early ones, as I mentioned in the first part. Always keep that in mind. The horse family, which has a known superb fossil record, we know almost everything about horses. There are a lot of little details to fill in, but their fossil record is one of the best known for terrestrial vertebrates. So let's look at 55 million years of equid evolution and their major trends, starting with Eohippus 55 million years ago all the way to Equus, which evolved in the Ice Age. You have overall increased cruciality, so-called running adaptations. And then hypsodony, tall teeth, brain complexity, and body size once again. So if we look at the body and brain, Eohippus and Orohippus in the Eocene, body size 9 to 50 kilograms. Their brains get bigger, but not just bigger, they get more complex, as I'll show you soon. Oligocene, Mesohippus, 50 to 130 kilograms. The Miocene, Merychippus, it's 70 to 310 kilogram range of Merychippus species. The Pliocene, Pliohippus species, 80 to 470 kilograms. And then, of course, Equus during the Ice Age, 90 to 420 kilograms. Big horse. Cruciality, Eohippus started with 3 toes and remnants of the first and fifth. The foot got longer. We still had 3 toes. Side toes still touched the ground in Mesohippus in the Oligocene. In the Miocene, Merychippus, 3 toes, side toes don't touch the ground, but probably important in soft ground. And then the Pliopleistocene, Pliohippus and Equus. 1 toe and remnants of the second and fourth. Hypsodony. You start with very short teeth. Brachy means short. Don, of course, is tooth. Dentist, odontist, whatever. So brachiodont for Eohippus and Orohippus. You get to Mesohippus and Oligocene. Still brachiodont, but a little taller. By the time you get in the Miocene, you have hypsodont horses. And then the Pliocene and Pleistocene, you have very hypsodont and extremely hypsodont teeth in Equus and some other horses. So we usually talk about hypsodony and tooth height, but really we mean tooth volume increases. So the tooth gets very, very large and very, very tall is one way to achieve that. Just remember, evolution is not orthograde. There's not a line of progression. Evolution is a bush, not a stem, or a race, a linear race where you have Eohippus evolving to a more advanced one, a more advanced one, a more advanced one, all the way to Equus. That's not how evolution works. There's no predestination. It's just a crapshoot. Mostly depends on prevailing climatic conditions, at least from what I know and have learned over the last 40 years. So, the climatic change through the Cenozoic of general cooling the last 52 million years gives us a times arrow. If mammals adapt to the climate and vegetational structure, and if the climate changes in one direction for millions of years, then mammal evolution should show this trend, yes? Apparent orthograde evolution, right? It's apparent orthograde, it's not true orthograde. Evolution is not a straight line game or any game that leads to more superior organisms. Overall global cooling the past 52 million years gives us a predictable trend. Yes? If late Cenozoic climate had changed back to a paratropical regime, then paratropical ecomorphs would have re-evolved, and we humans wouldn't have evolved to see this prehistory shift. Right? We are products of the Ice Age. The modern horse Equus isn't superior to the first horse Eohippus. It's just different, as in adapted to a very different habitat. If you take the grass grazer Equus and transport him back to the Eocene 50 million years ago, he wouldn't survive. He'd go extinct. The grassland it's adapted to didn't exist. In fact, grasslands didn't exist back then. So the Eohippus niche was that of a tropical deer. The forest browse on fruit and some leaves. And the tooth shape can tell you this. You can also look at the scratches on the teeth, and that can help. This is quite different from Equus. In Equidae, we see increased cursuality. They shift from digitigrade, walking on the toes, to unguligrade, only on the hoof. You see elongated distal limbs. If you get a more efficient gait, the longer your limbs are. Reduced toes, right? If you want to make an efficient walker and runner, right, you reduce the number of toes, reduce the number of joints, reduce the number of bones. Make one long bone is the simplest way, or in case of artiodactyls, it's two. They have 2 digits. The cloven hoof mammals are the artiodactyls. Right? The perissodactyls are one-toed in horses and 3-toed in rhinos and tapirs. Right? Horses are a little more cursorial than rhinos and tapirs, in case you hadn't noticed. And their legs, of course, are restricted to 4S motion. Horses aren't good huggers with their limbs. They can't wrap around. Right? They can't move their limbs out and in a whole lot. Most of their motion is restricted fore and aft, front and back, for moving efficiently through large home ranges and for running fast. Eohippus, 55 million years ago, tropical forest frugivorous deer niche, fruit eater and leaf eater. The weight of different species, about 6 kilograms to 32 kilograms. Mesohippus, about 35 million years ago. It's a woodland mixed feeder deer niche. So it ate grass, which is in the woodland is much softer than the grassland of a prairie. Masses varied maybe 25 to 50 kilograms for species of Mesohippus. Parahippus, species range maybe 60 to 150 kilograms. It was also a woodland mixed feeding deer niche. Just a bit bigger, and maybe ate more grass. Pliohippus, 7 million years ago. Equus, 2 million years ago. These are very large horses. Pliohippus, 100 to 180 kilograms for various species. Equus, 240 to 420 kilograms. These are grassland mixed feeder to grazing horses. All right? If we look at how they're built, they're the ankle bones. The metatarsals are the sole bones, and then these are the toe bones, which is called phalanges. One is a phalanx, many are phalanges. Think Latin for that one. So we see this becomes not just large, but elongated. It's relatively longer than in Eohippus, Equus is. We can see it's now walking on one hoof, right? The side toes have almost totally disappeared. They're just vestigial metatarsals, or the sole bones. And they probably only exist as structural support for the ankle bones. So let's compare high density vegetation to low density vegetation. Where do you expect more and better runners? Increased coursality, which people usually associate as running ability in herbivores, is often thought of improving speed for predator escape. But often, the major selective force is a more efficient gait. I think most of the time this is what it's for. There are times where predator escape is more important, and it's probably the major selective force. But I think it's the major selective force at open habitat because you have to travel farther to get enough food. Open habitat literally means there are less plants around, so it's low density vegetation. And if you're bigger with longer legs, you can take bigger steps and travel farther. Imagine shrinking yourself down to the size of an ant and you have to travel 10 miles to get enough food. Very difficult to do. If you're a toddler and have to travel 10 miles to get enough food, very difficult. If you're a full-grown human, it's not so bad, right? Hunting and gathering over, 10 miles or whatever, it's not too bad. It's a pretty good day. So I think the major selective force for increased cursoriality is actually just for a more efficient gait to travel far to get food. If you look at any animal, what's the major reason for body form? It's how they get food. Giraffe, antelope, mole. The major selection for body form and how they move is for getting food. If you don't get enough food, you can't reproduce. You die. You can't do anything. So it would be no surprise that the major selective force for a body form is locomotion, getting food. Well, there's my opinion anyway. So, if food's at a low density, you have to travel farther, so larger body size and longer limbs are advantageous. Also, a larger body can be better in a more seasonal environment. You can store more energy, more fat, and you have relatively larger muscles. Also, limb length is best correlated with home range size, not running speed. Another reason to think that the major selective force is for having a wider home range in a low dense vegetation area, or what we say open habitat. Humans have long hind limbs for a primate or any mammal. Though we're not good runners or jumpers, we have an efficient walking gait for traveling far. We have a very large home range. Humans are odd and extreme mammals in many ways. That would be for another talk. But we mentioned a couple things about them. Humans really are built for walking. That's what we're good at. You want to exercise? Do walk. Well, swimming is really good because it's easy on the joints. But we have phenomenal stamina for jogging, right, which would be for hunting, even under savanna sun. Right? We're diurnal creatures. Most mammals are active at night or crepuscular. They're active in low light, dawn, and dusk. So humans are very odd. We have excellent color vision because we're active in the day and you need to see when the fruit is ripe. That's why our color vision is so good. All right? We're basically frugivores like any primate and tropical animals. We just have all these fancy social things and tools, and we've controlled fire and so on. So, the problem with being human is we pay a large price for being very large brain, walking upright, and so oddly. If you look at a human skeleton and compare it to our near relatives, the chimp and the gorilla, you can get an idea of how tall our limbs are. Compare a toddler human to an adult human. You see a toddler has chimp proportions. Even if the toddler's far away, you go, is that an adult human or a toddler? You can tell just by the way they walk, if you've paid attention at all. They have short limbs. They have chimp limbs. If you watch a toddler, the femur are straight like a chimp. We have to not just learn to walk, but our skeleton changes as we learn to walk. It's a phenomenal thing. In humans, it takes 7 years of walking, or about 6 years of walking, until about 6 or 7 years old, to develop an adult gait. Right? Horse, it'll be walking and running after a few hours. Human has to learn to walk once it's a toddler, starting, right, 10 months, 12 months, 14 months. It's a toddling and gets a pretty good gait by 3 or 4. By 6 or 7, it has an adult gait. You have to learn to walk, and it takes years and years and years and years. Wildebeest, 10 minutes, keep up with mom, or you're dead. Right? So, humans are very odd in many ways. But take a look at their lower limbs. In an adult, half our height is limbs, lower limbs or legs. Gorilla and chimp, they're about 40%, right? And they, of course, they knuckle walk, so they don't even stand upright like we do. So humans have a lot of odd adaptations that put stress on the skeleton and other things. So we do pay a high price. Hemorrhoids, back pain, childbirth is very difficult because we're so fat-headed. So a lot of things that are expensive for human. Our brains are so fat, we need more um, fat, protein. We need a lot of salt and water because we have to cool our big fat brains. That'll be a topic for another talk. So, Hypsodony. Why evolve tall teeth? Many rodents even have ever-growing cheek teeth. They never stop growing their whole life. So they always have teeth to grow. If you look at an elephant, the poor little things, often they die from a lack of teeth. They starve to death. By the time they hit 60 to 70, they've worn out all their teeth, even though they had this nice conveyor belt system to replace their teeth throughout their life. So a new tooth drops in and they start wearing it. They only use about 1.5 teeth on each side of their mouth, up and down. So that's how they get their teeth to last a long time. They also make very, very large teeth. You know what an elephant tooth looks like? You should look it up. Anyway, why evolve tall teeth? Well, rodents that have ever-growing cheek teeth, if they didn't have that, they'd actually starve to death at a young age due to running out of tooth. What they're eating wears down their teeth. Sandpaper effect. Pocket gophers and voles have ever-growing cheek teeth. Modern horses, elephants, pronghorns, beavers, bison, they all have very, very tall teeth. Where do they feed? What do they feed upon? What do they have in common? All questions you want to know. The answers too. So, brachiodont, short teeth versus hypsodont. Just to give you an idea of the structure. If you look at a human, the root of the tooth is about the same height as the crown. If you look at the root of a modern horse tooth, equus, it's very hypsodont. It's extreme. It is, the crown is several times taller than the root. And if you look inside their skull, they're all teeth in the snout. Right? It's quite amazing. So, they have very tall teeth to handle processing grass, combating wear. Modern grasses out in the prairies and dry areas is pretty rough stuff. Takes a bit to chew it. You also have the problem with dust and grit on it. So if you look at the horse, also note that the premolar evolved to look and act like molars. So they need a big grinding area. How big? Well, they had to convert the molars, which are usually slicing teeth in a mammal, into grinders. They look almost exactly like molars. They are very tall. And if you look at the occlusal surfaces, they are quite large. And they have lots of ridges. All right? Horse is amazing. It can take a long bites of long blades of grass and just a few chomps, cut it into little tiny bits and swallow. Very efficient chewing system for blades of grass. It's amazing. Or hay if you prefer. So if you look at horse teeth, they have very flat surface, low relief, and lots of ridges. So lots of micro-cutting just in a few chomps. Larger, taller teeth last longer, especially when food is tough or greedy, intrinsically or extrinsically. So dog, brachiodont teeth, right? They're just made for cutting meat. Pig, brachiodont. It's an omnivore, eats plants and some animals. Beaver's hypsodont. You try chewing wood and bark. It's a tough thing. Bigger and taller molars and the premolars trend to become more and more molar-like, which greatly increases tooth volume and grinding area. What increases the rate of wear of an herbivore's teeth? Well, tough food. Could be high in fiber, and some have phytoliths, so it's intrinsic to the food. The food itself wears your teeth down quite a bit. And then, of course, phytoliths are the mineral silica deposited in between plant cells. So basically, you're chewing glass. Or chewing toothpaste. Toothpaste has diatoms. Diatoms are made of silica. They polish your teeth. If you were to chew toothpaste all the time, your teeth would wear out somewhat quickly. And they do a lot of polishing, but eventually it would wear your teeth down a bit. So, plants with high amounts of silica are grasses, right? These open habitat grasses, and horsetails. Horsetails are used for scrubbing pots and pans if you lived out in the prairie down in the good old frontier days. That's how much silica they have in them. Dirt on vegetation surface, right? That's extrinsic. If you're in open habitat, the wind blows. Little particles are knocked along the ground and hit the vegetation. If you're feeding at low level, you can get a lot of dirt in your ground. The wind will blow dust on vegetation, in an open habitat. So basically, you're almost eating sandpaper at times, right? If the vegetation is particularly dirty. So, whereas open habitat, there's a lot of wind, you get dirt on plants. And you're feeding on leaves and stems, and you're going to eat a lot of dirt, and that's going to wear your teeth down. Sandpaper effect. So if we look at hypsodont in horses through the Cenozoic, we find they go from brachiodont all the way to very hypsodont, and they trend to more and more hypsodonty. Eohippus, brachiodont. Mesohippus, still brachiodont, but a mixed feeder, woodland horse. Hypsodont, protohippus, that's a good hypsodonty. Look how tall the tooth is compared to the roots, or the crown of the tooth, rather. Equus, extremely hypsodont. And of course, these are mixed feeders and grazers. They're eating a significant portion of grass, over 90% grass for a grazer. That produces a lot of wear on your teeth if you're eating tough grass out in the open. A correlation between the hypsodonty of horses and the temperature trend through the Cenozoic, the coefficient is negative 0.8. So that's a pretty good correlation, better than I expected. But there you go. If you look at rodents and artiodactyls, horses, rodents, and artiodactyls are the dominant herbivores in open habitat in the world today. So these are the ones you're going to look at for evolutionary trends in mammals through the Cenozoic. You're not going to look at tapirs because they haven't really changed much in 50 million years. And they still live in the tropics. They still do tapir-like things like they did about 50 million years ago. So it's not going to tell you a lot about mammal evolution or mammal trends through the Cenozoic. So, rodents, and then artiodactyls, peccaries, camels, pronghorns, and a whole bunch of other ones. You can look that they're hypsodonty. They start brachiodont, they get into mesodont and hypsodont and super duper hypsodont or ever-growing teeth. Right? Artiodactyls, none have ever-growing teeth, but there's a pronghorn that comes pretty close to it. It's so extremely hypsodont, it's just impressive. Anyway. Temperature trends correlate with hypsodonty in rodents. The correlation is high, just like in horses. And artiodactyls is a little higher, probably because I have a little better data for the artiodactyls. Anyway, if we compare the hypsodonty trends among these three dominant groups in open habitat in the world today, correlation of hypsodonty between rodents and artiodactyls is nearly perfect. Right? Artiodactyls and equids, also nearly perfect. Is that a coincidence or external control? As in sandpaper effects of feeding changing predictably due to climatic change. I'm going for predictability. These herbivorous groups have different diets and feed at different levels. For rodents, pocket gophers feed under the ground. Well, if you're eating roots, they tend to have a lot of dirt on them, so your teeth might wear quite a bit. You might end up with extremely hypsodont teeth or ever-growing teeth, as you might expect in modern gophers. So, the hypsodonty evolution is close to the same. I think that's a result of them adapting to the Cenozoic trend of increased open habitat. And that's the end of part 2 of 3. And remember, help feed Barbie. She's all bones. And meow.